Hello everyone, it's Dianne at Minerva. I hope you're all doing really well today. And right now I'm going to share with you a sew along for this gorgeous sweater pattern, and it's by Sew House 7 and it's the toaster sweaters. As you can see, you have what you can make, and this one has a high neck and this one here has side vents and the lower neck detail. They both have different sleeve variations as well. So choose the one that's perfect for you. Now what we're going to be using today is a Minerva exclusive loop back French terry. This one is called Peony Dusk. It's a really lovely vibrant print and it will make a really cosy sweater. Now wash and prepare your fabric before we begin, and also check your sizing with the packet. So check your measurements, also the level of ease that you're happy with. You may prefer it bigger, a little more baggy, or you may prefer it more fitted. So bear that in mind when choosing your size range. When you've done that, we're ready to begin cutting our pattern pieces together. So let's go and do that now. Here are the pieces for our sweater. So this is your front piece. You're going to cut one on the fold. The fold line is here. Make a note of your markings. You want at least 20% stretch going this way. This is the back piece. Again, you're going to cut one piece on the fold. Here is the fold line, make a note of your markings. Here is the sleeve. This is a straight grey. You're going to cut two pieces, cut them as a pair. Again, you want the 20% stretch at least going this way. Note your markings. This is the cuff. You're going to cut two pieces. This is the fold line. This is the straight grain. Note your markings. Here is the back bottom band. You're going to cut one. This is the fold line. Make a note of your markings. Here is the front bottom band. Again, you're going to cut one. Note the fold line and the markings. Here is the neck band. Cut one piece. Note the fold line and your markings. Now we're ready to begin making our sweater. So first of all, you want to wind half of your thread onto your machine spool, and of course check your needle is sharp. Now we want to use the correct type of needle. So as we're using a stretch fabric, we do need to use a stretch needle, a ballpoint needle, or one designed for jersey. So as this is a French terry, I'm using a ballpoint size 80. I find that this works best for me. You may prefer to test it on a piece of scrap fabric before we begin. Then when you've done that, we're ready to start. First of all, you're going to line up your sleeve with your front piece like this. So you'll notice that you have two markings on one side and one marking on the other. You need to line this up with the marking here on the front piece, pin it in place. Then we're going to stitch that with either a stretch stitch, or you can use your serger overlocker, whichever you prefer. You do need to use a stretch stitch on this fabric, so you can either use the triple stretch stitch if your machine has it. You can change to a small zigzag stitch, so make the zigzag small and also your stitch length. Test this on a piece of scrap before we get started, and that's what I'm going to be using today. Now the seams on this pattern are 1 centimetre unless I state otherwise. Back tack to begin. Now if you've used a regular stitch like this, or a regular zigzag stitch, you can edge finish it after with an overlock if you prefer to do it this way. That's the way I prefer to do it, because you can always check your fit and it's easier to correct mistakes if you don't overlock it straight away, because that takes away some of your seam allowance and always it's more difficult to unpick. So I'll leave that up to you. Complete this step on the other side. Now attach your back to your sleeve. Again, you will find that you have markings here, so you have two on this side and two on the back piece. Make sure you've got the right piece because they all do look very similar. So if you lay it out flat, you can see that you've got your front and then your back. Make sure that it's equal and even. They are very similar shapes. Again, we're going to stitch this with a 1 centimetre seam and then edge finish it if you wish. Once you've done that, we can press that seam towards the body on all pieces. Now this is optional, but you can do 2 lines of top stitching down each of your raglan sleeves. So to do this, we're going to use a twin ballpoint needle. Just pop it in as you would normally. You'll need to wind some thread onto an additional spool. And then you just thread them both up together the same way that you would normally, only when you get to the bottom you'll be threading 2 needles. Test it on a little piece of scrap just to get the hang of it before you begin. Stitch close to the seam that you've just created, but be careful not to catch in any of the other fabric underneath. Now fold your neckband in half like this so that the short edges come together. We're going to stitch this seam with a 1 centimetre seam. Edge finish or overlock it if you prefer. You can do 2 stitch lines over it if you're worried about the stretch with it going on and off your head. Remember to use your stretch stitch or your zigzag stitch. Now fold the neckband in half with wrong sides together and make sure you line up the centre back seams here and also the markings just here. You may want to stay stitch it up, just pin it in place. We're now going to pin it to the neck. Now when pinning it in place you want to make sure that you have right sides facing like this. We're lining up the centre back seam with the centre back neck, the centre front with the centre front of the sweater. Then we need to pull on it just ever so slightly just to bring the other edges to meet like this. Stitch in place with a 1 centimetre seam using your zigzag stitch. Once you have stitched your neckband in place, again you can press the seam down towards the body and top stitch around it. Now I would do this again with a ballpoint twin needle. If you're just going to stitch around it with a single line of stitching, I would use a slight zigzag stitch just to make sure your stitches don't stretch out when you're pulling it on and off your head. Now pin your front to your back with right sides facing like this. We're going to pin all the way down the sleeve, so we're going to stitch along the sleeve, back tack and reinforce at the underarm and then down the side, again with a 1 centimetre seam using a stretch stitch. Now take your cuff and fold it so that these edges come together like this, so you can see it's shaped. We're going to stitch down this side with a 1 centimetre seam. Now bring wrong sides together and make sure that your edges line up. Now we're going to place our cuff on our sleeve like this. So this is the folded edge, this wants to be facing upwards, up the sleeve like this. We want to make sure that we line up the underarm seam with the seam on the cuff here. Then we have marking here, so that goes the halfway point of your cuff just here, so you may wish to fold that first and make a little mark. Pull on it to finish pinning it the rest of the way. Then stitch in place with a 1 centimetre seam allowance. Edge finish that raw edge with a zigzag or overlock stitch. Then when you've done that, you may wish to twin needle it again the same way that you finished your other seams by pressing it towards the sleeve and stitching it the whole way around. Repeat on the other sleeve. Now take your back bottom band and your front bottom band. You're going to place them right sides facing like this, and we're going to stitch down this short edge on both sides, making sure you match up the marking here for the fold. Now fold your band and give it a press with wrong sides facing like this. I always like to make sure I place a pin on both the front and back so I don't get mixed up which is which, so I always use a black one for the back. Now we're going to pin that to our sweater. Now line up your bottom band with your sweater like this. You want to make sure that you line up the notches front and back and also the side seams. Pin it the rest of the way around and stitch in place. Now finally, twin needle around the bottom if you wish by pressing the seam up towards the body of the sweatshirt. So here is the finished sweater. I thought I'd pop it on so that you could see it on a body today. I think it works really well with this fabric. It's really comfortable. I like this particular fit. I made an 8 today, so do have a look at the measurements and not just the number, because bear in mind they don't refer to specific UK sizes usually. You need to go on your body measurements. So I think it's a nice shape, comfy fit, and the high neck would be really useful for colder days. But made in a lightweight fabric, you could wear it any time of year. Well, I hope you've enjoyed sewing along with me today. I've really enjoyed making this sweater. I think it has a lovely shape to it, and of course there's the other option to choose from if the high neck is not for you, and you can also omit the band. I look forward to seeing what you've made, so please remember to include any photographs with your comments. You can also take a look at the Minerva Craft Club to get 10% off all your orders for a whole year, and of course create a free account with us to join in with our wonderful worldwide sewing community. That's all from me for today, but I hope to be back soon with more sewing inspiration for you. Thank you so much for watching today. Bye for now.